Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, July the 15th, 2025. Today is going to be quite a short video. I've got something I need to do, and so I can't go on for a couple of hours. Now, as far as my topic is concerned, it is going to be Jeffrey Epstein, because the whole Jeffrey Epstein saga just continues, and the Trump presidency is in a bit of trouble with its base because it's just had to defend this announcement or this memo from the Department of Justice, saying that there aren't any secret sort of client lists, and it's all been investigated, and a lot of people are very unhappy about this, and so some members of the Trump regime are getting a lot of flack. For example, Bondi, the Attorney General. So there are a few charts to look at, and we really are talking about a shadow, Epstein's shadow, and he may be dead, but he's still having a powerful impact on what is going on in the United States, certainly on its culture. He just won't go away. So before I talk about Jeffrey Epstein, I want to look at what's going on astrologically and in terms of the Ching today, which is Tuesday, July the 15th, 2025. So here is the chart for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, if appropriate. And really, astrologically, there isn't a lot going on. The moon is still in Pisces, as you can see. It's at 22 Pisces, quite close to the North Node, and it's making a trine to the Sun, and it's making an opposition to Mars. And in terms of the exact aspects taking place today, well, that is pretty much it. Now, one thing we do notice, the moon is conjunct the North Node, and so that means that again now all the planets are on one side of the nodal axis. So here is the North Node, South Node, and now the moon has made that crossing. That means that we're back to Kalasapa Yoga. The time of the snake has started again, and it's sort of at the moment it's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. The Kalasapa Yoga is not going to last forever, because you'll notice that Mars is creeping beyond the South Node. Will soon be beyond the South Node, and so when I don't know, we've probably got a couple of weeks at most left of Kalasapa Yoga, so it is coming to an end, but slowly. But now it is starting again because of a moon crossing the North Node. I mean, of course, this is a Vedic technique, and one needs to be using the sidereal zodiac, use the sidereal zodiac to delineate it. And so, moon trine Mars, moon trine Sun, moon opposition Mars, quite different aspects. Moon trine Sun is a very harmonious aspect. It is about balance. It's about the yin and yang being all in order, and things should move, and it should feel that things really are at one with one another. Now, before the moon makes a trine to the Sun, it makes an opposition to Mars. So first you got moon opposition Mars, then you got moon trine Sun. So that moon opposition Mars might create a bit of tension. And the question is, how does one behave? Moon is conjunct the North Node, Mars is conjunct the South Node. So with moon conjunct the North Node, you're thinking, well, the right thing to do is to be sensitive, particularly as the moon is in Pisces. Try to understand what's going on. Use your emotions. Don't necessarily overreact. Mars conjunct the South Node in Virgo would be getting over concerned about things that are unimportant and making a big deal about them. And that could just spoil the harmony, at least for the time being, for a short period of time, because the moon, having made that opposition to Mars, does make a trine to the sun, and that might give us the idea of some kind of disagreement or some tension sort of managing to resolve itself, in the end. So that really is the picture. Moon is in Pisces all day, unless you're in California or Hawaii or Alaska, because the moon does move into Aries late in the evening on the west coast of America, but it's pretty late in the evening, and I don't think that you need to worry about that too much. Well, unless you're a night owl. If you're in, I don't know, if you're in California and it's sort of 11 o'clock at night, then you might experience a change. You might become more dynamic, perhaps. Well, I would say that, but except the moon is making a conjunction to Saturn, so you might want to be more dynamic, but you might also be aware of some of the things that might be holding you back. Anyway, I'll be talking about moon in Aries in detail tomorrow. So as far as the picture for Sydney, Australia is concerned, it's not really so different. We've got the moon still in Pisces. That moon opposition Mars may be more prominent, by the way, in Australia than in the Americas, in Australia and New Zealand, because the moon is right close to that opposition of Mars, and the trine to the sun really doesn't happen until much later in the day, and so in fact even into tomorrow. So yeah, if you are in Australasia, not such an easy day than if you're in the Americas. There may be more tension, more aggravation, but the moon is in Pisces. It's in mutual reception to Jupiter, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And just remember that the moon is making a conjunction to the North Node. That is the way forward. Moon in Pisces conjunct the North Node is about using your feelings, making the most of your feelings. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, and we have Mercury starting to make a trine to Chiron, but it's got a way to go. I mean, I don't think that trine is exact today. So that's that Mercury trine Chiron. What do we say? The things we say might matter, and the things we say might be rather different, because we want to be different, and because we want to maybe stir things up, or at least get some attention. And additionally, the Earth is now exactly square Chiron, and so Earth square Chiron, it's kind of similar to what I said about Mercury trine Chiron. It's not just about communication, it's about who we are. And the question is, how can we be different? Also, you could say Earth square Chiron. You might say the wounded Earth. However that wound is, well, that kind of depends on your perspective. If you're into the environment, the wounded Earth, but there may be other wounds going on in terms of the suffering and war, and what do we do about it? And we might feel wounded, and a wound to the collective is a wound to the individual, and the Chiron needs to be heard and needs to be noticed, and so perhaps there is something we need to say about that. So that's the main picture for today. There is not much going on, and that seems to be the case. Maybe I think it might be the calm before the storm. That's not to say that nothing is going on. Of course, I'm only looking at from the perspective of astrology. Just because the astrology says nothing is going on doesn't mean that nothing is going on. There are still going to be events, and we'll have to see sort of new week. So now let me Well, it's not quite a new week; it's already Tuesday, but things can still happen. So now I want to look at the 12 signs, and these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, July the 15th, 2025, and I expect to be a lot briefer than usual. Aries, the moon continues to move through Pisces, and as a result, you probably should not be trying too hard to get noticed. You might want to be noticed, but is now the right time? And also, the moon is making a conjunction to the North Node. The North Node is telling you, where should you be going? Where is your direction? Where is your path? And this is about short-term destiny. Destiny can change from day to day, and at the moment, Aries, the right thing to do is to step back from things. You don't have to be right in the middle of the action, and it's not necessarily though going to work out like that, because there are going to be temptations. The moon is making an opposition to Mars, and there might be a temptation, Aries, just to get involved in things which you don't have to get involved with. It's just really quite irrelevant detail. Certainly irrelevant right now, and certainly not worth getting annoyed with. But you might. Mars is moving through Virgo. Virgo is about material details. So with Mars moving through Virgo, conjunct the South Node, that is the line of least resistance. It's easy to be picky. It's easy to be critical. To just focus on someone's mistake, some little imperfection. And if you actually become argumentative about it, well, that would really suggest that you are going in the wrong direction. And so, instead, tune into that moon in Pisces, conjunct the North Node, and also the moon trine sun. Just relax. If possible, see the connections and affinity between things rather than the differences. And if you can take that approach, then I think that it should be a reasonable day, and you'll be able to get on with people, and things should be okay. But just resist that temptation. It's easy to be argumentative. It's easy to point things out, to point out people's mistakes, but it's just not worth the aggravation. Taurus, you should be thinking about your role in it all, how you connect, and you've got a role, but other people have got a role as well. So it's tempting to be an individual, to be a super individual. Taurians can be quite stubborn, and they can decide that they're going to really stick their neck out and make it clear who they are and what they like and what they don't like. But it's better if you can, if at all possible, see the broader perspective, see how you function within the group, and what the group has to offer. And if you can socialize today, so much the better, because your communication skills are actually very good at the moment, because the moon is making a trine to the sun. It's not just making a conjunction to the North Node, it's making a trine to the sun, and so things are just flowing, and you should just allow the flow to develop. And it's not necessarily about you. I mean, I understand that there are things you regard as being important, and you might be special. You might not be special, be precious about some of your activities. You regard it very important that you do something at a particular time, and you're not going to compromise. It's all about you. But such an approach is not helpful, and it's better to put other people first temporarily. This is just a temporary situation, but give other people a chance to express themselves and listen to what they have to say, and don't be afraid of putting on hold some of your own personal ambitions. It's not really about being selfless. It's about being practical, and it's just about going with the flow. And there is a lot of flow today, and there should be a lot of flow. And I think that is something that you very much can benefit from. Gemini. Gemini, we have the moon making a conjunction to the North Node in Pisces, and Pisces is of course a high-profile sign, at least in the Gemini chart. And so this moon conjunct the North Node, which is also making a trine to the Sun. So this aspect is really very fortunate if you handle it in the right way. And the way forward is to think about what you want, to think about your ambitions. If you believe something matters, then just go for it, and keep going. And you can at the same time come over as being a fairly sympathetic person, and I think that people will take your word for it in most cases. There's no need for a struggle, but still you have to keep in mind where you're going. And what you don't want to happen is for you to get distracted by things that are irrelevant, or at least irrelevant for the moment. And I'm thinking particularly of home and family. Your home, there might be temptations and annoyances relating to your home and family, and you should certainly listen to what your family are saying, but you don't want to just abandon everything, just totally focus on what's going on in your domestic life, because that would be a waste, and it wouldn't even be helpful. In fact, if you put too much energy into your home and family, that energy could backfire, and you could create a situation where arguments become distinctly possible, or at least tension. And so try to look out rather than in, and try to think about where you are going, and that doesn't mean that you have to be completely ambitious just for the sake of it. You have to think about what is right for you. But with the moon trine the Sun, that is a very harmonious aspect, and it is about things being at one with each other. And there could be a financial dimension to this aspect. It could be saying something about what you can do to make things work for you financially. So if you've got any financial goals, then let things flow, let things happen, and see what you can do. And certainly if you're working with money, with moon trine the Sun, I do think that you'll be quite successful. But just avoid home, family. Now, if you work with real estate, the situation might be different, because this Mars conjunct the South Node might be a problem. So because anything to do with homes is not working well. Where there's a home, there's a problem. And so do bear that in mind today, Gemini. Cancer, moon moving through Pisces pretty much all day long, unless you're on the west coast in California or Alaska or Hawaii. Then very late in the day the moon might move into Aries, but by and large the moon is moving through Pisces all day long, and the moon is making a conjunction to the North Node, and that is telling you about where you should be going, and what your general approach should be. And Cancer, you should not be satisfied with the way things are right now, at least in an intellectual on an intellectual and philosophical level. You might think you've sorted everything out. You might think you've got the big picture dealt with, but not necessarily. and there's always more that you could learn, more that you could discover. And so be ready to ask questions, and if something that doesn't make sense, well, explore it. And it's all about, it is all about the big picture. It's not about worrying about small, insignificant details, but you could somehow make those details significant, and that's absolutely not what you want to do. I mean, there is a conjunction between the Mars and the South Node forming, and because the Moon is making an opposition to Mars and the Moon is making a conjunction to the North Node, that Mars-South Node might be an aggravator. And it could be, Cancer, that you find yourself bothering about something which really shouldn't be bothered about. And just because one fact doesn't make sense, just because you're developing a bigger idea and you can't incorporate one fact, there's a contradiction, and you might worry about contradictions. And if it doesn't fit, well, you just throw everything out. Well, that's not the right approach. You can't expect everything to be perfect. Nothing is perfect. There's always a little flaw, something that doesn't make sense. And just because one thing doesn't make sense, it does not mean you throw the whole thing out. You just have to accept that there are differences and there are incompatibilities, and some things are just illogical, and that's just the way it is. Fortunately, Moon makes an opposition to Mars, and then the Moon makes a trine to the Sun. So it's possible that you have a situation at some stage in the day where things aren't working out, where there is a conflict, where you may feel conflicted, and if you just sit it out, you don't overreact, then you start moving into the Moon trine Sun, and then things start coming together. Leo, today you continue to be fairly serious, and you understand that there are things going on under the surface that perhaps need to be explored, and that's certainly the right thing to do. So don't just accept surface appearances. It's easy, of course it's easy to accept surface appearances. It's always easy, because you don't have to bother yourself with too much thinking, too much questioning. But sometimes you just have to accept that life is multi-layered, and you have to occasionally dig deep to find the truth. And that is the path for you. And don't get sidetracked by irrelevances. And this does also apply to money and your attitude to money. I mean, money could be important today, but you have to take the right view. Money is perhaps more complicated than you realize, and it's not just about the money in your pocket. It's about what's going on under the scenes, and you certainly shouldn't assume that everything is in order, that everything is above board, that everyone is being straightforward. And that's not just about money, it's about people. People can be complicated, and you must assume that people are going to be complicated. And if they say something and they say, oh, it's very simple, it's like this, well, don't necessarily believe them. So being aware of complications is important. And going back to this issue of seriousness, I do think it is a serious day when there is some serious thinking and perhaps some serious feeling to do. And additionally, when you start to be realistic about what's happening around you, you might come to the conclusion that some things are coming to their end, that they can't really do anything more that's useful to you, and it might be time to just say thank you and goodbye. So that might apply to things you're involved with, could apply to other people. So you can't you can't be connected with everything, you can't be friends with everybody, and some things are temporary. I mean, that is the essence of life. Life is dynamic, and in order to for life to stay dynamic and not to stagnate. Every now and then we do have to chop and change, and sometimes that does mean having a separation and distancing ourselves from things and people that aren't any longer any use or much use. Virgo, you don't have to be in complete control. It's important that you're not in complete control, or at least you have to be aware that other people exist, that there are other pressures. Now, one aspect that we're starting to feel, it's a bit of a way off, and that's a conjunction between Mars and the South Node. And Mars conjunct the South Node in Virgo, which is your sign, is potentially a problematic aspect, because it encourages you to maybe put energy into the wrong things, put too much energy into yourself and you being right, you getting the attention, you having the final word, when instead you should be thinking about the opposite, which is Moon conjunct the North Node, because we do have Moon trine the Sun, and we do have Moon opposition Mars. Moon opposition Mars comes first, and Moon opposition Mars could be a conflict, particularly as this opposition between the Moon and Mars is across the main axis of your chart, and this Moon-Mars opposition could be quite tense, and it would be made more tense if you are obsessed about yourself, and that is the line of least resistance, to think that your priorities are the most important when they're not. You have to think about other people, and if you can relate to other people and understand their perspective, then that is the best way of dealing with today. And there is a trine between the Moon and the Sun, and that Moon trine Sun, it's pretty easy going. And if you just accept perhaps that other people are worth listening to, you don't have to express your own opinions excessively, and you just listen to what's being said. You don't feel that it's absolutely important to say anything, then it should be fine. And don't say or do things in an excessive way. And it's important, I think, that you don't try to get too much attention, because if you do get attention and people are watching you, they're listening to you, they're observing you, then there might be problems, because your words and your actions could be hasty, they could be unfortunate, and you might get concerned about things which probably you should not be concerned about. So, overall today, it's probably best if other people take the lead, and if other people take the lead, then you're going to benefit. I think that that works well for you. I mean, of course, at a later stage, you will have a chance to be more assertive, but not at the moment. Libra, you have to be quite disciplined today. I think that's the best approach. To really concentrate on what matters, and what's important to you, and making sure that it's all in order, that it's all sorted out. And what you don't want is to be sidetracked by things which are irrelevant. I mean, you might not regard them as being irrelevant, but they are irrelevant. Just small details which might be your own fears. Fear could be a problem. You might be absolutely concerned that you need to get something right. I mean, you do have to get things right, but you have to ask yourself, where is the obsession? And if your motivation is at all obsessional, then that is perhaps a hint that you aren't getting things right. And instead, you need to be having a fairly natural approach to how you organize your life. You know how to organize your life. You know what's good for you. Instinctively you know what's good for you. And that may say something about your health and your fitness, and you know what needs to be done. And the moon is making a trine to the sun, and moon trine to sun is very balanced, and so you can align yourself to your environment and without having to worry. Don't be concerned that things aren't 100% right. It's good enough that you do sort of make the effort. And from a work point of view, the moon is making a trine to the sun, and as I've already said, but that moon trine sun could have a relationship to your career, and a very good relationship. I think it is about harmony. It's about you and other people working very well together, and you know what details matter, and you're not being obsessed about it. You just know what to do. You know how to conduct things, and your general approach, I think, will very much be appreciated. Scorpio, Mars is starting to move towards a conjunction of the South Node. Now, this conjunction between Mars and the South Node is not exact. It doesn't become exact for, I don't know, best part of a week, but it's possibly something you need to be aware of. And the problem with this conjunction between Mars and the South Node might be that you may be encouraged to do something which is, just wrong, maybe, or you just know it's wrong, but you still find yourself doing it anyway. And so really consider over the next week or so, and perhaps more, how you are using your energy. Where are you putting your focus? And it just could be that you're putting your focus into the wrong things. And so if we want to be specific about that, well, I don't know what you're doing, but you possibly shouldn't spend too much time, with other people socializing. It might seem like a good idea, but it's probably not a good idea. And as a Scorpio, that's something you should be aware of. Scorpio is known for keeping to itself to an extent. You understand that other people are of limited value. That in the end, you're alone, as we're all alone. But Scorpio knows that perhaps more than others, and this whole idea about the social dimension is something that normally you treat with a degree of skepticism. But somehow at the moment there could be the temptation to spend too much time worrying about other people and what other people are doing, when instead you should be focusing on the other side, the moon, because the moon is making an opposition to Mars and it's conjunct the North Node. And what you should be doing is, thinking about, yourself and what you can do and how you are unique. And so it's better probably to do things, on your own than to feel you have to do it in a group or in a team. And when you do interact with other people in a team, for example, it's not going to be comfortable. You'll have to sort of work out, what do you do? I mean, you might find yourself having to compromise, or if you don't compromise, you just could become difficult. And so this Moon-Mars opposition should probably just be sidestepped, and one way of sidestepping it is to just concentrate on what you want to do, and don't worry too much about what other people are thinking and planning and so forth. Now, the Moon, having made an opposition to Mars, it does make a trine to the Sun, and the Moon trine Sun it's a great aspect, and it's in water signs, and The moon in Pisces is trine Scorpio, in a way, the whole sign, and likewise with the sun in Cancer, it's making a trine to Scorpio as well. So there's a kind of a flow there with the moon and the sun making that trine aspect, and so it is about who you are and what you can do, and if you find the right place, the right focus, then I think that you can really be impressive. You can impress yourself even with what you can do if you're given the chance, and you just want to make sure that you are given that chance. And if you worry too much about what other people are thinking and saying, then you're not going to get anywhere, and it might be a missed opportunity. Now, that's not to say that you have to be a hermit. The right people who really appreciate you, really understand you, they can be a real bonus for you. And in fact, there is a slight contradiction here, because at some level, your ability to get on with people is quite good, provided it doesn't come to a clash, provided there isn't any disagreement. There should be no scope for disagreement. It is about mutual respect, but the emphasis should be on other people respecting you, and not the other way round. And so if you've got something important to do, something important to offer, then that's great. It really does matter, though, that no one tries to impose their will onto you, because you're the one. You're the one that is at the center of things right now. Sagittarius, you don't really have to go out of your way to get noticed. You might want to. I mean, that might feel strangely the easiest thing to do. That on the surface doesn't make a lot of sense, because or maybe I'm biased because I'm an introvert. Having to deal with people, having to socialize, having to keep a high profile is always the most difficult thing to do. It's always easier to just drift around in one's own space. But for you, Sagittarius, somehow being out there in the world, getting attention, trying to make waves, that somehow feels easier. And it seems to be sort of more difficult just to, maybe just stay in one place. That's hard work. It could be because you're feeling restless and you'd rather be somewhere else. You're always, wherever you are, you'd rather be somewhere else, and you have to kind of resist that temptation. If you stay where you are, then everything is going to be available there. You don't have to look any further. And the moon is making a trine to the sun. Moon trine sun is a great aspect, and remember, the moon is still in mutual reception with Jupiter, your ruler. And so with that moon trine sun, that does mean, Sagittarius, that you can, I would have said, enjoy yourself, but in your own quiet way, and perhaps also in a way that is quite intense. Doing something that is really important to you, and it may be something which just can't be explained. If you try to explain it to other people, they might not understand, and that's okay, because it's not a time where you have to be especially prominent. You don't have to project yourself to in terms of the outside world. And as I was saying yesterday, there is something about you that is very original, that's sparkling with ideas. You've got lots of ideas. You continue to have lots of ideas, and use these ideas and work on them. And you don't have to necessarily talk about them. You can just develop them in your own quiet way. Capricorn, it's good to have ideas and to have principles and to have a higher view. I mean, that's what guides us, and it, of course, it makes things a lot easier. I mean, if we have to spend forever making a decision for every single thing we come across, is it right or is it wrong? We could just spend ages and ages, and we might not get anywhere. But there is a problem about rushing to judgment, and at the moment, Capricorn, I think there is a possibility here that you see something and you immediately develop an opinion about it. And, it might be easier, but it's not necessarily the right thing to do. And, instead you should, step back and just look at things, how they are, and have an open mind. And sometimes you jump to a conclusion without working out first what the alternative view is. This is especially the case if you're dealing with other people. I mean, so in an extreme case, you think about being in traffic, and you're being held up by something in front of you, and the person behind you starts honking at you thinking it's your fault, but they don't know the full picture, do they? And so consider the possibility, Capricorn, that you don't have the full picture, and before rushing to judgment, really try to get the facts. And if you do, then it's just going to actually be so much easier for you. You'll be able to talk to people very well. In fact, at the moment, Capricorn, your ability to communicate is really excellent, and you can get people to talk to you, to open up, and they can explain things. And once you get the explanations, you'll be in a position to make a decision. And this trine between the moon and the sun, it's not just about how you deal with other people, it's also about how you relate to them as well. And if you handle the moon trine Mars, the moon trine Sun correctly, then I think that relationships should really blossom. I mean, there is no real opposition once you cross that moon opposition Mars. And so those are the two main aspects today: moon opposition Mars, moon trine Sun. So what happens is, first the moon makes an opposition to Mars, then it makes a trine to the Sun. So first there is the possibility of disagreement, of perhaps you jumping to a conclusion, and then there is you becoming more relaxed and being more agreeable. Not just you becoming more agreeable, but other people becoming more agreeable as well. And that does mean, when we're talking about jumping to conclusions, when you see people behaving in a way that you don't approve of, that just might be what you're seeing first. And if you just wait and you allow things to develop, and you allow people to explain themselves, then things will become clearer. And in fact, the day can sort of end on quite a harmonious note. Aquarius, it's important not to overcomplicate things. I mean, you might be tempted to just read too much into things, and don't forget Occam's razor, very important. Occam's razor. Occam's razor is about, you've got a number of possibilities in front of you, and the possibility you should be going for is the possibility that is most simple, that is most straightforward. And don't jump into the complicated explanations first. And of course, from a conspiracy theory perspective, of course, Occam's razor could be the enemy. Occam's razor is the establishment way of looking at things. It's just, the establishment wants you to think that everything is simple. For example, that Jeffrey Epstein did not have a clients list. There was no conspiracy around Jeffrey Epstein and his death, and that, using the obvious Occam's razor view, that's what you would say. You can get into all these complications and conspiracies and and come up with something else. But what you're doing, arguably, is going for the complicated solution first. And in this case, you should probably go for the simple conclusion first. Now, I'm not saying anything about Jeffrey Epstein or other conspiracy theories, but I'm just talking about you today. And today, if you want to make the most of things and manage things properly, then it's probably best to go for the simple solution. And that's especially the case when it comes to money. With money, people do try to complicate money. They do try to tell you that it's very complicated. You see, you've got these trends, and it's all about you've got to think about interest rates and how this relates to you, and portfolio management and all of these things, and it's well above your head, isn't it? It's that kind of view that people might try to complicate financial matters for you, when in fact things could just be very simple. It's just about money. You have money, you don't have money. Your money's working or it's not working. And so across the board, Aquarius, do try to keep things simple, and this is especially the case when it comes to money, and complications should be avoided. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, one aspect going on today is a trine between the moon and the sun, and this moon trine sun, it's a good aspect, and the sun in the Aquarian chart often has a connection with the other person, and so moon trine sun does mean that you and certain other people can have quite a harmonious relationship with one another. And part of the reason might be is that you can concentrate on the things that matter, the things that are important, and not get sidetracked by complexities, and really focus on the key issues. And if you can focus on the key issues, that means you're going to be able to get them out of the way. And once the key issues are resolved, then you're going to find it just so much easier to get on with people. And today I think you really can get on with people. Pisces, moon is still in your sign, and it's conjunct the North Node in your sign. And this means, Pisces, that it's important that you put yourself first. Today is all about you and what you want to do. Now, there are going to be irritations potentially, because the moon is making an opposition to Mars, and Mars is conjunct the South Node. So what might that mean? It might mean that there is pressure on you to follow another person's lead, or to spend a lot of time thinking about what other people are doing, worrying about it, and perhaps feeling guilty that you're spending too much time on yourself and your own interests. But there's no place for guilt here, and you shouldn't allow anyone to disrupt your flow. And flow, of course, is very important to the average Pisces. Now, this moon opposition Mars, it is an important aspect. It is across the main axis of your chart, but it is followed by a trine with the sun. So the moon makes an opposition to Mars, then it makes a trine to the sun. And so that could be about, firstly, having some aggravation, something not being right, perhaps you having to deal with another person and their particular way of looking at the world, and you would like to pay attention to them. That feels like being the easiest thing to do, but that's not necessarily the best thing to do. And I think that if you are putting yourself first, then today you'll be doing the right thing. And the moon is making a trine to the sun, and that moon trine sun is, it's a great aspect, especially as the moon is still in mutual reception of Jupiter. And so, you can pretty much feel free to do what you want. Whatever you want to do, then, do it. I mean, okay. Don't do anything that's stupid or something from the past. You don't want to do that. I'm thinking more about something that you want to do that is sort of life affirming and is very much about you and who you are. It's certainly not about following the crowd or pandering to someone else's demands. It's not about that, Pisces. But if you can really tune into the energy of that Moon Jupiter trine, Moon Sun trine, then it can be a really great day. And at the same time, you have some great ideas. I said this yesterday. Pisceans do have some great ideas. Your mind is buzzing right now, and so if you've got ideas, then don't just keep them to yourself. Don't worry about how other people might respond to them. They're there to be put into action. They're there to sort of illuminate everything around you, and that's something that today you can do. So those are my rather brief forecasts for the 12 signs, and now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. And I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 20, which is contemplation. You can see it's quite a stable hexagram. You've kind of got an image of, you've got a sort of a table-like thing, a secure table, and there's nothing that you have to do, and it's just about observing. And to begin with, when you try to observe things and try to understand what's going on, get a perspective, it may not be so easy because your view might not be wide enough. And I Ching does talk about this, because we're talking about the bottom line of a second. I think the second from the bottom line moves, and that can be about looking at the world through a crack in the door, and it's not like you've got the whole door open, but you've got a very narrow focus. And so to begin with, as you try to work out what's going on, as you try to contemplate the world, your view might not be particularly wide, and you might reach conclusions that are based on just insufficient information. But don't worry about it. Keep contemplating. Keep broadening your view. And it does seem that by the end of it, you start to get a real perspective. By the end of the day, or even before the end of the day, with contemplation, you get a perspective. You try your hardest. You know that to begin with, your view wasn't wide enough. You were able to start to take into account everything, and then you get a sense of perspective. And with this perspective, you see the temporariness of everything. You see your role, and you see that perhaps it's time to move on to other things, greater things. And then, because we've got some moving lines, we move to a second hexagram, and we move to hexagram number 47, which is oppression. It doesn't sound very good, but what it means is that we've got some responsibility to deal with, and that can't be helped, and it's not great, and so we have to shoulder that responsibility. And maybe that responsibility is as a result of that process of contemplation. We've seen what's available, we've seen what's going on, we now know what needs to be done, and having made up our mind, we're able to perhaps shoulder a burden. Other people may not be prepared to shoulder this burden. I'm not necessarily talking about a literal burden. I don't want you to do your back in, but if you do feel that you've got a great weight on your shoulders, a metaphorical weight on your shoulders, not a physical weight on your shoulders, it seems that you have the ability to see it through to a successful conclusion. And now, at the end of the video, I want to look at Jeffrey Epstein again, because he's just all over the place, isn't he, in the news, and even though he's been dead for some time. And so as far as Epstein's chart is concerned, that's a good place to start, Epstein's horoscope. And so there's some interesting things, of course, about Epstein's horoscope. And so we don't have a time of birth for Jeffrey Epstein, so we have to go for noon on January the 20th, 1953. And so the most important thing right now about Jeffrey Epstein's chart is probably the fact that he's got a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Now, that's a very generational aspect, but we have to remember that there is a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the sky right now, a very close Saturn-Neptune. So it's kind of interesting that the DOJ memo sort of saying that there was no, secret client list or anything like that has happened with a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And Jeffrey Epstein has a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So, you might wonder if you're making this kind of announcement with a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, a very close one, and Jeffrey Epstein has a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in his own chart, then perhaps one is reasonable to be suspicious. It's all very Saturn-Neptune, isn't it? Something is going on behind the scenes, and with Saturn and Neptune, and there is a lot of fear around. So, all of it, none of this is very surprising. And with Jeffrey Epstein, this thing seems to have really damaged the Trump presidency. Trump's base. It's all about thinking that Jeffrey Epstein represented something very rotten at the core of the system. And of course, there are a huge amount of conspiracies about Jeffrey Epstein. And just to say, oh, well, there was no client list, and I don't know whether the files have been released or not, whether they will be released. This is not a subject that I know a great deal about, by the way. So I'm just trying to look at the astrology. So it's not surprising that people are concerned about it. And so, and Jeffrey Epstein, how does one, look at his chart? Jeffrey Epstein has a Venus-Mars conjunction. A very close Venus-Mars conjunction. And Venus-Mars together, you see that combination is about sexuality. And Pisces, well, there's nothing wrong with the sign Pisces, but it can work in different ways. And Pisces may not know where to stop. Of course, with Pisces, you think of what part of the feet does Pisces relate to? Feet? I don't know. Did Jeffrey Epstein have a foot fetish? That would make sense, having Venus and Mars in Pisces, wouldn't it? And so that's a few words about his chart. I don't want to say a great deal about it, but there's one thing that's very interesting about his chart. Something happened on the day he was born. Eisenhower was inaugurated. So the inauguration of Eisenhower, well, he legally became president at noon on January the 20th, 1953. I think the actual swearing in was later, maybe nearly half an hour later. But it's kind of interesting that someone who's is so connected with presidents, people have always been making associations between him and other presidents. Now Trump himself is getting undermined potentially by Jeffrey Epstein, and yet he was born at this time when Eisenhower was inaugurated, and so that raises a question. What about Eisenhower's inauguration? Eisenhower is generally seen, as far as I know, as being a good president, one of the best, if some would say perhaps the best post-war American president. And so he was inaugurated, when there was a Venus-Mars conjunction in Pisces, and at noon, in fact, at noon itself, when Truman was stopped being president, Jupiter was exactly on the midheaven, although we have to remember that he wasn't actually sworn in until 1228. I'm not quite sure which time to go for, but I think noon is certainly an important time, and Jupiter was rising. And so that might have said something good about about Eisenhower's presidency. I mean, that's not. I'm not saying I agree with Eisenhower's policies. You could say right at the end of the Eisenhower regime, he started getting America involved in Vietnam. But you also think about his military-industrial complex speech, and which was said just before Kennedy took over. So those are a few thoughts about Jeffrey Epstein. Now, his own chart. Now, I think that Venus-Mars conjunction is important, and it perhaps explains part of the reason why he casts such a shadow. And so here's his Venus-Mars conjunction at 16, 17 Pisces, and here is the inauguration chart for of Trump's inauguration chart when Trump became president, and you can see that when Trump became president, well, the noon inauguration chart, there was a Venus-Saturn conjunction at 16-17 Pisces. So that Venus-Saturn conjunction was picking up on the Venus-Mars in Jeffrey Epstein's chart. It was picking up on his sexuality, the way he was presenting his sexuality, what he was doing with his sexuality, and the absolute chaos and destruction that was being caused by it. So you could argue that Jeffrey Epstein's sexuality is baked into the inauguration chart because of that Venus-Saturn conjunction. When I saw the inauguration chart, I was wondering about that Venus-Saturn conjunction because it didn't make immediate sense to me. And this may indicate that what's just happened with the Epstein files and the DOJ announcement is really going to have a powerful impact on the presidency. And so that's it. As far as the DOJ memo is concerned, I don't know exactly what time the DOJ memo was released. It was sometime in the early afternoon on July the 7th. It was being reported by 2:28, 10 to 2, that kind of time. So Libra was rising at the time of the release. And one thing that of note is that Uranus was at the sun was at 15 degrees 50 Capricorn, so it was on Jeffrey Epstein's Uranus, and so in fact it was Jeffrey Epstein has a Uranus Chiron opposition in his chart. So the sun was conjunct his Uranus, opposition his Chiron, and that may tell us something. It may tell us that Epstein's Uranus, his capacity to cause chaos, was really being brought out into the open. Also, at the time of this announcement, there was a Moon-Mercury trine. Now, Epstein has his moon somewhere between 4 and 16 Aries, somewhere around there. So you could say that Moon-Mercury trine was picking up on Epstein's moon. So that's certainly a possibility. And so I think there is evidence here, particularly because of the inauguration chart, that this issue is going to fester. It's not going to go away. And one word about Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. So I think I mentioned Pam Bondi quite recently. I wasn't very specific about it, but I was suggesting that she might have a spot of bother. And so there is Pam Bondi, the Attorney General. She's got her Mars at 2 degrees 34 Capricorn. So we just had a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, or we have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction at sort of 1 or 2 Aries. So she's got Saturn and Neptune square her Mars, and I was thinking, well, that's not a great aspect, and here we have it. As you can see, at the time of the DOJ memo, there's Saturn and Neptune. Neptune was pretty close to a square of her Mars. Saturn was reasonably close. So her Mars was really being hit by this, and so it must have been difficult, and is difficult and frustrating for her. And she's trying to do the right thing, I hope. But you can see how much pressure she's under, and of course there have been calls for her to step down, because this is not what Donald Trump's base was expecting. So anyway, I did say that this was going to be a short video. I think that's. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more to be said about this. Oh, one thing I should point out: I shouldn't forget Donald himself. So looking at Trump's chart. One observation is that if you look at the North Node is now at 20 degrees 42 Virgo. So 42 degrees Virgo. That means that the North Node is now square Donald Trump's nodal axis. And this probably is important. Remember, Kala Sarpa Yoga is about to start. For the next 2 weeks. That's the first point. Maybe less, because I'm not sure if Mars is going to change sign, and that's so the next week or two we've got Kala Sarpa Yoga. Donald Trump has Kala Sarpa Yoga, and so the North Node squaring the transiting nodal axis, hitting his nodal axis, may indicate that the next couple of weeks things could potentially blow up for Trump a bit. And okay, and this does indicate maybe that the Epstein saga is not going to go away and is going to have an impact on his presidency. And of course, he's about to make an announcement. I mean, I'm recording this video on Monday morning, so we don't know. He was going to make an announcement about Ukraine, but I don't know what that announcement is at the moment. And so that's one transit he has, and it's like North Node squaring North Node. It's something very fated about it, and something that is inevitably going to happen, and so he needs to think about it. Then there are his solar arc directions. One solar arc direction that we need to be aware of, not necessarily directly connected to. Sorry, that's the wrong one. One solar arc direction we need to be very aware of is solar arc directed Neptune. He has got. Remember, with the solar arc directions, we move every planet approximately 79 degrees because he's 79 years old. So his solar arc directed Neptune is close to the conjunction of his moon. It is applying to an opposition of his sun. He has got Neptune on his solar arc directed Neptune on his sun-moon midpoint. And this is a big warning for Trump. I think that over the next year or two, he is potentially going to be seriously confused. And he doesn't necessarily always know what he's doing. It's very undermining. I mean, he's got a full moon anyway in his chart. And a full moon anyway is, well, what's it doing? It's creating sort of indecisiveness. He's moving from one thing to another thing. He hasn't really been handling the whole thing very well. I mean, across the board, I think for the last month or two, maybe since his birthday, he seems to have... I don't know, his performance seems to have been deteriorating. That's my impression. And with Neptune opposition his sun and conjunct his moon, we think, he's clearly finding it difficult to think straight, I think. And he's being overly influenced by certain people in the White House, the blob. And I think we're getting evidence here that actually Donald Trump, for all his bluster, is probably turning into a weak leader. I mean, this is completely the opposite of what we expect, but a weak leader, because he is giving in to, for example, the neocons, as far as, for example, Ukraine, as far as maybe if you're a conspiracy theory and you really believe that the Epstein files are being suppressed, then Trump is just doing what's easiest. And so I think that we should, with Neptune, and I think that with solar arc directed Neptune getting closer to his sun moon midpoint, I think we're going to start to see the weakness of his leadership increasingly. And I think that anyone voting for Trump because they thought they were getting a strong leader may increasingly be disappointed. So those are a few thoughts. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.